right. Hi. Many of you probably don't know me. You probably know Phil, who is participating here. And we've got James Badman. My name's Ron Funk. I am a reptile hobbyist, relatively new to the hobby. But I've been meeting with Phil and talking with Phil for the last several years at reptile shows. I also happen to be a lawyer, so I like to hear myself talk. I like to hear myself interview people. So I talked Phil into allowing me to help provide some content and some information for USARK. Phil and I are going to be talking with James Badman today. James is one of the newest member of the board of directors of USARK. He is currently with Arizona State University. He's the associate director of the Department of Animal Care and Technologies. He has been breeding and working with animals, including reptiles, for a long time, and is part of the Phoenix Reptile Expo. So James, welcome, and thanks for joining us here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ron. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you this afternoon.
Let's start just by talking a little bit about you, letting some of the reptile keepers and people who follow USARK know a little bit about you and who you are.
So I live in Mesa, Arizona. I'm actually a native of Arizona. I was born and raised in Tucson, Arizona, so further south, and had opportunities to work in zoos and so did travel around the country a little bit, but did end up back in Arizona. And I actually met my wife in Las Vegas, and I'm married. We've been married 26 years now. And I have two daughters, and both of them are attending college right now. So they're my older children, not quite empty nesters. They're in and out of the dorms, but they do come back and stay with us on at our place. We do maintain a farm. As you mentioned, I raise a lot of exotic animals and keep a lot of reptiles. Kind of my specialty, bubble-fin tortoises, or my passion, I guess, is bubble-fin tortoises. That we do work with geckos and some other other animals as well.
You're also one of the few people in Arizona who can breed and transfer across state lines exotic species, non-native, like endangered species, like Galapagos tortoises, radiated tortoises, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I still maintain the captive bred wildlife permit. They've been kind of the unicorn of late. They're very hard to obtain. I think I've maintained one for close to 20 years now. It used to be a really easy permit. Fill out an application, 60 days later, you got your license, right? And you're like a registry. Now, I think the last 3 years ago when I renewed, the last time I renewed, I had an lobbyist, a lawyer, a permit writer helping me, and quite the battle. And we work with a lot of ESAM, that's a big species, and I think I have 13 species on my CBW permit, a lot of birds, as well as with tortoises. And so it's important for us to have it, that when if the U.S. Fish and Wildlife is actively phasing something like that out, it's great that I have it, but it's basically native and effective for me to really, and because both people have to have that permit. So it's great that I have it, but if there's like Valley Minus, for example, Venacious Amazons, I think is a better example. I think I'm the last private with no on my CW permit. So having it is great, but with no one else with it, it's basically about 5 years ago. We were working under my wife and I have a farm. It's active as permitted as a zoo in the state of Arizona, and we're holding animals under a humane holding permit with us. And the rules change as they do in a lot of states. So they do a 5-year review. That 5-year review ball, what they call articles or live animals in Arizona. During that 5-year review, they changed what you could do on those spinning level lemons. And in my case, you can no longer breed them. So with the and running a farm, that's what you do. You breed animals. And so I had these permits for restricted wildlife in Arizona that I could no longer breed, but would not be able to. They were removing the grandfathering clause too. So look to move to what they call being private game farm license, which allowed you to breed non-native or restricted wildlife and in Arizona. And when I applied for that, I was encouraged by the department to apply for that, which was the main goal of the game farm, and said, "Yeah, that's what you need." And I came back to nothing, and I thought, well, that's interesting, and I was very interested. And I inquired, and because there's anything additional looking to phase the private game farm licenses out, and what they could do with them, and what they could do with them. They wanted to restrict it literally to just game birds, and no longer allow people like myself that were using the mammals to breed mammals. However, that had not gone through the 5-year review process. So effectively, they were enforcing the rule that a rule change that hadn't gone through. And they was something they wanted to do, and they actually been years down the road. But at this point in time, they had not done it. So I reached out to my lawyer, and also a good friend of mine, Venture and Pride. That was we ran another zoo here in Arizona, and he had gotten in contact with a lobbyist, but I was looking for a lawyer, and we contested or appealed the denial of game farm license, and met with Arizona Game Fish and the Assistant Attorney General, and it was an interesting meeting because they're you're trying to obviously appeal the ruling, and it's something that I really needed. I had a lot of animals that we'd invested in that I couldn't breed anymore. And so we decided, or we were in that meeting, and even the Assistant Attorney General was very interesting. He was kind of shaking her head and going, they were enforcing a rule that hadn't changed, that hadn't gone through the rule process. And the example was even the lawyers were talking about arguing was, it's like deciding to change the speed limit and not changing it, keeping it posted at 65, but saying it's now 45. Everyone's going 65, and then they start pulling people over and getting their tickets. And that's essentially what they're doing. They knew they wanted to get to this point. They hadn't done it yet for the legal process, and so we're enforcing it. And so, but they knew they wanted to be there. So they upheld my denial, and my appeal then had to go to the commission, Arizona Fish Commission. And as I was working that route, I started meeting with the lobbyists, and I thought, this is bizarre. They're only the Assistant Attorney General like this, telling them they can't be doing this, but they continue on. And for the commission hearing, I was told that they were going to table it because the lobbyists approached one of the fish shares and explained what was going on. And they, through that process, they were encouraging Phoenix Fish to come up with a solution for them. That they eliminated the one permit that allowed me to do breeding, and then they want to change the private game farm license, and yet we have an active person that was breeding that thing about breeding and shit the ball. And at that point, I actually learned the power of the lobbyists. So when my one of my mentors and friend, Nick Wilson, he has since passed, but he was wildlife so he was very active in the political scene, but also with the lobbyists and the lobbyists. So this was kind of the precursor to us forming a coalition here in Arizona, and what led us down that path, comprised of pet stores reptile shows, breeders, zoos. There's 3 zoos that are members, and even product distributors for animal products. And we formalized, I want to say it was 2 years after. The end result of the commission tabling and working with the lobbyists was they decided to get big license, and it actually gave me like a broader ability to work with restricted wildlife. And kind of made me laugh. They wanted to get rid of this one license and restrict it, and then with the work of the lobbyists, I've given a license that allowed them to get in the art. But after that kind of lesson and working with my friend, we decided we needed to, and you could start seeing what was going on in other states. With puppy bans, the puppy cat, rabbit, and even one time when it was actually starting here, so and was fans, and I think we're one of the only states or 2 states where there's a state statute that removed city ordinances allowing ban pet stores from being or city banning the city ordinances banning pet stores from being sell puppies and kittens, rabbits, and at one point in Mesa, in the city I'm in, they were trying to lock things like cars as well, the bird species. And so, as a little handful of that, basically being able to sporadic or in any airport. And so they, we worked with another group that is also to the wood or now, because it was sort of a franchise that was really concerned about. But within a period of time of those 2 years, we decided we need to have this. And then Arizona Game Fish, we come to the next 5-year review, and in that 5-year review, it was extremely harmful proposal that was to add all endangered species to the Arizona restricted wildlife areas, which would essentially make them illegal people out by trading signals.
So, Phil, is there anything stopping reptile keepers, hobbyists, pet stores from forming similar type of coalitions in their own states in this manner? And do we have anything like that going on right now?
There absolutely is nothing to prevent other states or cities from, duplicating what they've done in Arizona. A lot of states, so a question we get asked often is, why doesn't every state have a USARK? And the reason for that, there's actually been several that were formed and they just faded away, because what you see often is that these groups will form, or a state version of USARK will form, and it's because of already proposed legislation. And then after that legislation gets stopped, there's nothing for them to keep working on, so they just fall apart and fade away. Whereas in Arizona, they make sure they stay in regular communication, and they're almost constantly working on something. So even if they're not fighting bad legislation, they may be working to improve some laws that are already in that state. So they're constantly working on something. So again, it has to be more than just forming because of one particular bill or ordinance. You have to have a plan to keep everybody up to date and working on things after that fight is over. Kind of the same thing we see with a lot of state herp societies, unfortunately. They're kind of fading away because they don't stay active. So the same with these legislative efforts or advocacy groups. There has to be something to keep the wood in the fire and keep the fire stoked.
Yeah. So, for instance, let's say that I'm in California. If a group of hobbyists, I'm not one of the big names here, but guys like Miguel, and Antoine before he moves. Some of the bigger names, if they wanted to kind of form their own group, get to know some of the other entities like pet stores, like zoos, even local zoos. It might be a good thing to kind of model after Arizona, forms that sort of a coalition, and try to fight individually in the states some of the state regulations and state law changes that are coming up, because USARK has really has its work cut out for it, because nationwide you can't have your fingers in every single state. But I think what James has done, I was really impressed with that, with forming that coalition, kind of taking that on yourselves, James, and keeping that going. How do you keep that going, James?
It's we do monthly board meetings in any member on the ballot club. We do have a board. We wanted to make sure that it wasn't just one or two people. It's that first board. So we try to always have a member from every area. One that represents pet shops, one that represents distributors, one that represents these areas, one that represents the breeders. We're going to be getting some trade shows, and making sure it's participation. And one of the things I wanted to mention, jumping back, was while that bill would not have been good, it's hard to say there's something positive in that bill, but the positive piece of that bill was it affected everybody, because one of the problems we had in before we formed was everyone going, this doesn't affect me. This doesn't, this is the pet store problem. This is the bird people's problem. This is the reptile people's problem. And we present a bill that bans all endangered species, or we're listening with wildlife, and that affects pretty much everyone. And so we it was helpful in that I was able to go, okay, guys, we all have, we're all in this fight together, and then right after that, it's Lacey Act amendments, right? And so, again, whether it's a state or federal problem, we stay engaged, and then the other thing that the coalition does is we end up eating dinner. The lobbies attended, and it's typically well attended by local representatives. We've been very fortunate, in that we have a lot of interest in our coalition, machines, authorities, but we had some petty, with Nikki Wilson arrived and attending dinners. He was well recognized in the state, and so I had some members now with that carry involvement in not only the industry but in the state politics, management, and I will always appreciate what he did, and he was good at talking and communicating with people at all levels, and he constantly emphasized to the coalition or movement, we need to make friends before we need to get for our representatives to introduce ourselves, everyone, animals, babies, let them know what to do, invite them out, and make those connections. But he was old, because he'd always say, go to the Rotary Club. So I don't know, we sure we're around anymore. In Arizona, we just strictly moving and stuff. But
and I know you told me earlier that it's amazing how much a local politician will listen if you throw $50 to their campaign. And all of a sudden that they're listening to you, and they will consider the things that you're talking about, and they may take them on to committees or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Now it's another thing I did with policy switching, especially when they're in re-election year for our 72 years. Go to your events, make a donation, become a friend, and that was a big lesson. You know, animal people were, at least I always feel like, we're introverts. We work with animals for a reason. You know, we like to, we want to do fun things on the farm. You know, so going to dinner, you got to really put yourself out there. It, it it was a valuable lesson. Some I had to call out for help a few times, so I know the importance of it now. And those calls were answered, and so it brought me to do it. So I tell people, anything whether it's in my coalition or I have people from other states reaching out, and just big saying that's some folks from California asking how did you do what you did? It's like, it's a painful process. You got to reach out. It takes time. It takes the ability to get on. Yes, the thing I didn't want the things that I had, and that was that ability to breed animals, to work with certain species of animals. There's cases we feel like we're in the farming industry, or I'm not going to be regulated with that, right? And so it's like, how do we stop that? And this is why you do it. Yeah. And now the coalition's recognized as definitely experts in the industry. Usually they want to make sure we're on board with any sort of regulations. And as you're being proposed and that's the best time. That's when you can make changes. People are always like, oh, it's open. It's now to public comment. I'm thinking, folks, this is done. It's done and over. It's at the public comment period. It would take a lot to make a change. I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's, I think I speak better than I can, but they're like, it's our opportunity. No, our opportunity was last 6 months ago. That's why it's so important. A lot of these they're entering, and in our case, we're using after the comments about it, and that speaks to something. They're paying attention to us.
I think what I take from this is that there's a lot of opportunity for just the little people like me to band together, get to know the other breeders, the pet stores, go to the zoos and talk to the people there, get to know the scientists, the educators, and look into, especially in the states where things are happening. California certainly, but I know stuff is happening out in North Carolina. South Carolina has had some issues. Idaho comes to mind. Others feel, we're all, like you say, we're all in this. Breeders, hobbyists, pet stores, zoos, educators, we're all in this, and these laws affect all of us, right, Phil?
Yeah, absolutely. And whether they want to admit it or not, no one is not going to be challenged or targeted if you're working with animals by animal rights groups. That's kind of who's at the bottom of all this. And this year specifically, we had 2 state bills that we engaged in and put alerts out on. We call them animal program bans. The animal rights groups and legislators a lot of times call them circus bans. But in 2 of those states, AZA, which are the big zoos, the big accreditation in the U.S., they were not exempt. So AZA had to show up to these, and AZA almost always gets an exemption on these things. But in Connecticut and Oregon, I believe it was, they were not exempt from these animal program bans. So even the biggest zoos that you've ever gone into, they could not have done programs with animals if these bills had passed. So they had to show up and oppose it. And, everyone needs to realize, even if you get a pass this year, it doesn't mean that if the bill passes, they're not going to come back and you're going to be in the crosshairs the next year. So, even the big zoos and everybody, no one is safe from these targets of these animal rights groups and their agenda and these bills that they push to legislators.
Yeah, don't wait for USARK to do these things, because we're the ones. I'm in California. I need to do this, get to know some of the other California breeders, get together. What can we do? And yes, donating to USARK, that's huge. I know it's well appreciated. And I know that Phil and I have even had discussions about how USARK has seen quite a bit of support, but there are other ways to support as well. And from keeping our eyes on what's going on in our cities and our counties and our states, and banding together, even to the point like James, you did in Arizona, to the point where you have a coalition where you can hire your own lobbyists, and how effective that was. I know that you said you had spent months really chasing that change. You got a lobbyist on, and boom, couple of weeks, it's done. 2 weeks, yeah. Phil, is this coalition that James has in Arizona, is this a replacement in any way for USARK and what USARK is doing?
It's not a replacement for USARK, but that Arizona coalition brings so much value to USARK and our efforts as well, because in addition to the lobbyists that Arizona coalition has, you have USARK watching for legislation too, not only at the state and local levels, but also the federal level. So again, that Arizona coalition is formalized. It brings tons of value because that coalition can contact their federal representatives and senators as well as at the state level. So again, that just makes our fight all that much stronger when something does happen either in Arizona or at the federal level. James, would you like to add anything?
You're exactly right. We're focused on state issues. However, the federal issues are justice, a big of a problem and a concern. And we who are lobbyists are connected with our congressmen and senators representing Arizona, and so when they end up being a committee, like what we did on the Lacey Act Amendment issues, we can help facilitate access or communicate with them what it's going to do, what impact it's going to have on their constituents, right? That's always or should be a big piece of concern is encouraging my constituents. And so when we reach out and say this is proper legislation that's going to impact my business, it's going to impact what I'm doing, and we're taking action to them. But as Phil knows, I rely on them heavily on my call. I'm going, what does this mean? What can we do to help or support USARK? But we're interested facilitator to help on the federal levels, and we really rely on USARK as well as a coalition.
For those who are watching, thank you for watching. Continue to support USARK. Phil, you got any closing statement?
No, just thanks everybody for watching this, and thanks for subscribing to our YouTube channel. So please watch and share.